Here we go. And let me do something else. Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Excuse me 1 second. Okay, let's go into, we're getting very close to the end of this Parsha, by the way. It's not a real long one, and it's relatively straightforward, if you can say that about any Parsha. So let me go ahead with the screen share. And hopefully I'm not going to eat my words. All right. So as you can see, we've sort of are closing at this point the section on Abraham. There are 3 chapters on that, or 3 parshiot, 3 weeks we spend on this. And next week we're going to start Oldot, which is one parsha essentially about Isaac and Rebecca. So here we go. So you know that, of course, the beginning of this parsha, we read about the death of Sarah, and now we're going to close this parsha with the death of Abraham, and in fact go a little bit beyond that too. Ve'ele yemei shnei Chayyei Abraham asher chai, and these are the days of the years of the life of Abraham which he lived. So this asher chai, right, could have been left out. It seems redundant. And there is no commentary on this, at least not in the Rashi about it. But my thought is that, does it say, in fact, that he lived every single day, right? You can live and not really live, but that he made the most of every day that was given to him. And if somebody wants to make a comment, please raise your hand. Otherwise, check to make sure you're on mute. So these are the number of days. Me'at shana, 100 years. V'shivim shana, and 70 years. V'chamesh shanim, and 5 years. And of course, shana is singular, so literally it means 100 year, 70 year, and 5 years. And this parallels to a great extent how this parsha opened with the life of Sarah, which was 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. So Abraham lived to 175 years. And of course, when he started his journey, he was 75 years old in Parshat Lech Lecha. And so he lived another 100 years. And I suspect that also, from a literary point of view, is a significant amount of time. So let's take a look. Me'at shana, v'shivim shana, v'chamesh shanim. So it doesn't just say 175 years. It says 100 years, 70 years, 5 years. So he says, Ben Kuf, when he was 100 years, Kavin Ayin, it was as if he was 70 years. Uven Ayin Kavin Hey, and when he was 70 years, he was like 5 years, Belochet, not sinning. That he was very mindful of his life, very careful about his life, and refrained from performing sins, but committing, I should say, sins. So give me 1 moment, please. Very good. 1 second here. Okay, I'm going to go on. Vayikbaru oto Yitzchak and Ishmael banav, and the subject is Isaac and Ishmael, his sons. Kibru oto, they buried him. They interred him, El Ma'arat HaMachpelah, literally to the cave of Machpelah, El Sdei Ephron, to the field of Ephron ben Tzochar Hachiti, the son of Tzochar the Hittite, Asher al Pnei Mamre, which is in the place of Mamre, right? Pnei means, can be surface, it can mean literally in the face of, in the presence of. But I don't believe it's referring to anything. Then I believe Al Pnei Mamre is referring to the place of Mamre, not a person, although Mamre is also a person. Now, one thing that we notice is that Yitzchak precedes Ishmael. But the truth is, who was born first? Ishmael was born before Yitzchak. And that gives rise to a very famous, I think it's relatively well-known interpretation, which is in its way, I think, lovely. Excuse me. One second, please. Excuse me. Yitzchak v'Yishmael. And this is from Bereshit Rabbah, Mikan, and from the fact that Isaac precedes Ishmael, She'asa Yishmael tshuva, that Yishmael actually performed repentance. He actually repented. V'holich et Yitzchak lefanav, and he placed Isaac before himself. He set Isaac before himself. But and this was a sign, sorry, let's see.
Seva.
Seva, right. Vehi seva tova. And this is thank you, Shirbeth. The great seva is like old age, but it also has the connotation of ripe old age. So we can translate seva tova as ripe old age, shene'emara ba'Avraham, which was stated with Abraham. So watching your children fight with each other is just one of the most painful experiences you can ever have as a parent. And for Abraham to see that Ishmael and Isaac had reconciled, and essentially it was for Ishmael to reconcile with Isaac, this was something that contributed to Abraham's ripe old age, that he could die feeling a sense of satisfaction, etc. So it's a lovely idea, by the way, as to what that might imply in the grand future. Onwards, just explaining the burial spot. Hasadeh asher kana Avraham me'et bnei Chet, the field which Abraham had purchased from the children of Chet. Shama kubar Avraham, there Abraham v'Sarah ishto, and Sarah his wife were buried. So Abraham and Sarah are buried together in the cave of Machpelah. And the fact that it mentions this again, in some ways makes it a legal statement. In other words, that original acquisition and title to that field is repeated here, and there's a certain legalistic quality to the need to repeat this particular phrase and to make sure that it's a legitimate claim. Vayhi acharei mot Avraham, and it was after the death of Abraham, Vayvarech Elohim et Yitzchak bno, that God blessed Isaac, his son, Abraham's son. Vayeshev Yitzchak, and Isaac dwelt im be'er lachai ro'i. Literally, it means with the well of lachai ro'i. And it's interesting, right? Because who do you associate Be'er Lachai Ro'i with? And this is the second time this has been mentioned in connection with Isaac. And the fact that we associate Be'er Lachai Ro'i, the first time that we come to this, has to do with that story of Hagar and Ishmael, where she thinks Ishmael is going to pass away from thirst, etc. And this angel appears to Hagar. And it's so interesting that we have Yitzchak associated with this. And the first time we read about this, because it's unusual, it jumps out at you, was that Isaac, after his mother died, Isaac went and found Hagar and had her return to Abraham. So I wonder, first of all, on a general level, we can understand this as implying reconciliation, of having the association of some kind of reconciliation going on here, which of course is a beautiful thought.
Did you do the Rashi for Tet?
Let's see. Yes, we talked about how Ishmael did tshuva. That was on.
Okay.
We did do it.
All right. Sorry, mind glitch.
Okay. No, it's okay. It's all good. Sometimes I've obviously skipped at times a Rashi or a verse. Vahi acharei mot Avraham. Okay, so we had this. This is the verse we're looking at in Rashi. Vayhi acharei mot Avraham vayvarech. So here's the thing. We have Abraham passing away, and it says God blessed Isaac. Who would you expect to bless Isaac? Preceding his death. Wouldn't you expect it to be Abraham? So again, trying to look at these verses in a very intense kind of way and saying, wait a second, why does it specify that God blessed Isaac? And we're going to get the answer. So that's the question Rashi is dealing with. Okay. Nachamu tanchume avelim, or nachamo tanchume avelim. So what was the blessing here? That he brought consolation. In other words, that God was consoling Isaac. That was the bracha. So that's one interpretation. That the blessing that God brought to Isaac was that God consoled Isaac for the death of the loss of his father. There's another interpretation going in a different direction here. Af al pi shemasar hakadosh baruch hu et habrachot la'Avraham, even though, and we've read this before, that God delivered the ability to legitimately and powerfully bless others to Abraham. In other words, God gave Abraham the power that when he blessed someone, that person would be blessed, that it would have God's full support as to whomsoever Abraham blessed. So that's a very, of course, he says, v'nivruchu v'cha, right back in Lech Lecha, how the other nations would be blessed by him or through him. And that's being understood in a very literal kind of way, right? So despite the fact that God had given this particular ability to Abraham, Nityare, Abraham was afraid, levarech et Yitzchak. This is so interesting, right? That he was concerned and afraid to bless Isaac. Why? Mipnei shetzipa et Esav, because Abraham foresaw that Esau, Yotzei mimenu, would come from him, that Esau was going to come from him. Amar, so Abraham, again, we've got this word Amar that we so often translate as say, and here I think the better translation is thought or took into consideration, right? But it's a mental process. Yavo bal habrachot, let the master of blessing come, vivarech et asher yitav be'enav, and bless whomsoever is fitting in his eyes. Whoever he sees is good in his eyes. Uva HaKadosh Baruch Hu, uvarcho. Okay, uracho. And the Holy One, blessed be he, came and blessed Isaac. And that's what's the nugget inside this verse that we just read. Let's go here. Let's see. All right. Going on. Ve'ele toldot Ishmael. And now we're going to conclude this parsha with Ishmael, because basically we're not going to be talking a lot about Ishmael anymore. The Torah's concern is now going to be into Isaac and what happened, what befell Isaac. And so in a sense, the Torah ties up any loose ends regarding Ishmael at the end of this particular parsha. And later on, we'll see that when the Torah is ready to go on to the story of Joseph and basically has concluded the main sections about Jacob, it talks about Esau and Esau's generations, also the same kind of style. So these are the generations of Ishmael ben Avraham, son of Abraham. And so again, associating Ishmael with Abraham and saying that he's Abraham's son adds a tremendous level of legitimacy and authenticity to Ishmael. Even though he might have been the son of a handmaid at the time, that she was a concubine at the time, but nevertheless has full legitimacy as of Abraham's offspring. Asher Yalda Hagar Hamitzrit, which Hagar, the Egyptian woman, bore. He says we haven't finished describing how Hagar, So let me go back a little bit to make sure I go on this. Yalda Hagar HaMitzrit, going on, Shivchat Sarah, the maidservant of Sarah, La Avraham, to Abraham. And I don't think there's Rashi. Oh, okay, yeah, no Rashi on this. The Elishmot b'nei Ishmael, and these are the names of the children of Ishmael. Bishmotam, according to their names, specific names, Latoldotam, according to their generations, meaning in order of their birth. And Rashi's going to explain that. Bechor Yishmael, the firstborn of Yishmael, Nevayot. So we're now going to have a series of names, right? Nevayot is the firstborn, the Kedar, the Adba'el, Umivsam. So we've just gotten 4 names there. Let's take a look at the Rashi on this. Bishmotam Latoldotam, according to their names, according to their generations. Seder Ledatam Ze Achar Ze. In other words, the order in which they were born, one after the other. Onwards. Umishma, Veduma, Umasa. Again, 3 more names. Hadad, Vetema, Yetur, Nafish, Vekedma. So again, 4 names here, right? Hadar, Vetema, 5 names. Yetur, Nafish, Vekedma. 5 more names. So, Elohim, so notice how many names you've got. And I think that's extremely significant. Okay, we'll see in a sec. It says specifically, Elohim b'nei Yishmael. These are the children of Yishmael, the Elish Motam, and these are their names. The Chatzrehem. Literally, a chatzar is a courtyard. Rashi is going to tell us that it actually means something else. Uvetirotam, that refers to walled cities. Shneim Asar Nesiim, 12 princes, the Umotam, and I would say corresponding to each of them, each of these cities, is how I would understand this. But notice how Yishmael bears Abraham and Hagar, 12 sons, and of course we have a parallel with the 12 sons of Jacob. The number 12 is significant because there are 12 mazalot, there are 12 signs of the constellation, and what we are doing is we are again using literary techniques. We are saying that there is something universally significant about them and about the 12 tribes, and here for its own direction, which is a direction we're not going to go in, but clearly it's making some significant statement about them. And you might say that this is a little bit of a universalistic element within the Torah. At least I believe that is. Let's take a look. So Rashi has to explain the word chatzrehem, tirotam, etc., etc. So here we are, chatzrehem. So literally it means courtyards. And he says krachim, this is cities. It's a rabbinic word. Krach is a rabbinic word, which means a city, she'ein lahem choma, which are unwalled. And Rashi tells you how he derives this interpretation, the Targumos. So he goes back to the earliest translation that we have, which of course is the Targum into Aramaic. That's the Aramaic term that he uses, that Onkelos uses.
So mine says befatz chehon.
Yes, it is. It's as I'm looking at the vocalization here, because this has the vowels, befatz chehon. That's the way it is. Correct. Okay. So sometimes, obviously, I do not say it correctly when I don't have the vowels. So befatz chehon, and let's take a look at it. Shehem mefutzachim. He says that they are, again, mefutzachim. This is from a root pei tzadik chet, lashon peticha. In Hebrew, that has the meaning of something that is open, unenclosed. And he gives an example in Psalm 98. Pitzchu v'rananu. If you're familiar with the Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms, you know that this is one of the Kabbalat Shabbat Psalms. And Pitzchu means break out, v'rananu, and sing out. In other words, you should just let your feelings fly in praise of God and singing God's praises. So, for Eile Shnei Chayyei Ishmael, we need to, I believe that's the next verse. So here we are. It just isn't numbered right there. The Eile Shnei Chayyei Ishmael, and these are the years of the life of Ishmael. Me'at Shana. So look at this again. Interesting, right? That Ishmael is being accorded here a level of righteousness, that his tshuva is considered a great tshuva. And just as in Abraham and Sarah, we have 100 years, ushloshim shana, 30 years, v'sheva shanim, and 7 years. I think it's significant that Sarah and Ishmael, they're not the same. Sarah is 20 years, but they also are number of 7 at the end. Vayikva, and the word vayikva, which means to pass away, but it actually comes from a root that means to shrink or to fall away. Vayamot. So, in other words, he passed away, he died, v'ye'asef elamav. And again, interesting, this is a very respectful way to refer to death. He was gathered to his people. So whether there's an allusion of some kind to immortality here, right, as opposed to, we know that there's a punishment in the Torah of karet, of being cut off. So being gathered to his people, meaning we could possibly push it to mean, right, he was returned to his people. He gained immortality.
But I would, unless returning gathered by God might be immortality.
I think literally it's meant, I mean, I've heard that the literal understanding is that the bones are gathered into the family cave, the family burial place.
Okay. And I've also heard, these are stories of people who have come back from near-death experiences, who basically say that they sort of come to the end of a tunnel, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and at that point, they're all the relatives that have passed away. So I'm not pushing this, I'm not saying it's compelling, I'm just saying it could be suggestive. Could be. I think there are other more specific and helpful meanings to it, but I'm just saying it's just an interesting expression. And of course, Shirabeth, that may be the case. I'm not sure of burial places where bones are actually mixed together. So, but it could be.
I don't think they're mixed. I think there's like shelves. There were a bunch of shelves or niches.
Right.
And the body was laid on a shelf, and then a year after the death, the family would gather, and they had likut atzamot.
Right, the gathering of the bones. Yes.
Right, and the bones were put into an ossuary and put into their place in the family grave, the cave.
And it could mean that, again, you're free to interpret that however you want. So last little piece here, and we come to the end of the Parsha. Vayishkenu mechavila ad Shur, and they dwelt from Chavila to Shur, asher al pnei Mitzrayim, which bordered literally means, again, near the surface, etc. But I'd say that bordered Mitzrayim, Egypt, and of course, knowing that Hagar came from Egypt, that she was an Egyptian, according to some traditions, I believe, an Egyptian princess, that the fact that the Ishmaelites lived close to Egypt should not be, is not coincidental. Bo'acha Ashura, as you come on the way to Ashur. Ashura means to Ashur. Al pnei chol echav nafal. He fell against all his brothers. And again, that's ambiguous as to what it really means.
And there's Rashi for 17 and 18.
We'll go to it. Sorry, let me see. Yeah, here we are, because this wasn't marked. Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. But Eli Shnei Chayyei Israel, Ishmael, etc. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba. So Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, Lama nimnu shnotav shel Yishmael. Why do we have the years, the number of years Yishmael lived? Of what significance is it to Israelite or Jewish history, right? Kedei leyaches bahem, so that we can associate through them Shnotav shel Yaakov, the years of Jacob, Mishnotav shel Yisrael, based on the years of Ishmael. So we know that Isaac was born, I believe, 13 years, I think it was 13 years after Ishmael was born. So we can figure out Isaac's years. We know how old Isaac was. I believe he was 40 when Jacob was born. So we can do the math. We're not going to be doing it now. We'll be doing it later. Lamadnu. So from this we can infer Shimesh Yaakov beveit Aver, that Jacob actually served in the house of Aver. Okay, Shem and Aver. These were children of Noah or descendants of Noah, and according to a tradition, they had academies. Right, they were places of learning. Yud Dalet Shana, 14 years, Keshe Piresh Me'aviv, when he left his father, when he had to run away from Isaac and Rebekah. Kodem Sheba Eitz Lavan, before he actually came and to stay with Laban. Shahare Keshe Piresh Yaakov Me'aviv. How do we know this? And again, he's not doing the math. He's only doing the basis on which we figure out the math, right? Keshepiresh Yaakov me'aviv, because when Jacob left his father, met Ishmael. That was the time when Ishmael had died. How do we know that? Shne'emar, as it says, Vayelech Esav el Yishmael, that Ishmael went to see Esau, okay? But he wasn't seeing, okay. I wonder, I'm just saying this thinking, did he kill Ishmael? Did Esau kill Ishmael? I'm not sure. But the point is that Ishmael died at that point, etc. Kamosha b'forash b'sof Megillah. So Megillah Nikret. This is something that's dealt with in the Talmud in detail at the end of the chapter Megillah Nikret, and that's the first chapter of the tractate of Megillah. And there's an editorial note here, Rashi hevi o sof Parshat Toldot. So Rashi is going to go into the math of this at the end of Parshat Toldot. Vayigva, interesting verb here. Lo ne'emara gvi'ah. We don't use the verb gvi'ah to talk about the death of someone, ela batzadikim, only when it comes to righteous people. So again, we're suggesting that Ishmael was a righteous person at this particular point. The word nafal, again, that's interesting, right? We had the word nafal with Rebecca alighting from the camel. Here we have the word nafal again, just an interesting coincidence. Shekain kamor, so he says that just as it says in the book of Judges, chapter 7, Midian va'amalek v'chol b'nei kedem noflim be'emek. It says that Midian and Amalek and all the children of the east, I'm not sure if he means here, noflim be'emek means that that's where they had their territory, right? Okay, so the nofel he's saying simply is that it just means that that's the area they inhabited. Kan hu omer lashon nefila. Okay, so he says here he talks about the term, he uses the language of nefila, to fall. Ulahalan hu omer v'al pnei kol achav yishkon. And there he says, okay, later on he says, and so in other words, in this place here, in this verse that we're reading now, it uses the term nefila, but later on it says he lived, he ishkon, he dwelt near his brothers. Okay, and he says ad shelo meitza. How do we reconcile this particular terminology? And nafal, to fall, has a connotation, a possible connotation of having warlike relationships. In other words, it wasn't in a peaceful manner. Ad shelo met Avraham yishkon. In other words, before Abraham died, they were dwelling there alongside one another. Mishe met Avraham nafal. But once Abraham died, they were now in I'm understanding by this, in an antagonistic relationship. And I may be wrong about this, but that's my understanding of the word nafal. And this is the end. We actually got to the end of a Parsha in our studies. So I will stop the share at this point. And if any of you have anything you'd like to comment, please feel free.
I would like to comment, but I don't know, Rabbi. Isaac and Ishmael never got along, and Isaac took Ishmael's birthright away, and also his blessing. So when they all came together at Abraham's funeral, how did they? I mean, I couldn't understand. And even so, Abraham Isaac was mad at Abraham because he was going to sacrifice him. So Isaac was mad too, angry at Abraham. I don't get the whole thing. All of a sudden, they came together and they were friends again.
Okay.
How did that happen?
Well, first of all, let's get the facts straight.
Okay.
Isaac never stole Ishmael's birthright. He didn't anything like that. You're talking about Esau and Jacob.
I mean, Jacob, yeah.
Ishmael. So you're not talking. We're talking about Ishmael here. You're talking about Esau and Jacob. Different.
Yeah.
People. Okay. And the story. Okay. So that kind of pretty much takes care of all your concerns, because we're.
Yeah, you're right. I'm wrong.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's easy to get confused. I'm going to stop the recording if that's okay, and we'll just take a moment more.